Okay, so thank you to Leslie and Sarah for setting the scene, telling you a bit more about EDS and the work we've done on the public library side. So I'm going to delve now into what UniCat is, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. We developed it in consultation with all of the key stakeholders. We wanted to make sure that we were providing something that would work for everybody, and importantly wouldn't break anything as well, because there are some very good workflows in place that we didn't want to touch, we didn't need to. So we talked to libraries, but we also talked to stock suppliers, system suppliers, publishers, we talked to SUPC about how the market works at the moment and what were the challenges that we could help with. We also looked at, in particular, what university libraries were buying. So the stock suppliers were really helpful with this in that they gave us a good set of anonymised sales data for a year, so we could see from the key stock suppliers for academic libraries the number of titles that were being purchased, the publishers, the date ranges, the subject areas. And what that enabled us to do was to put some parameters around UniCat so that we could be very clear about what we would cover, and also to make sure that that included the majority of what was being bought. We also wanted to take the opportunity to extend what had been traditional shelf ready to other suppliers, so not just the big suppliers. We also wanted to include things like Amazon, because we knew a lot of libraries were buying from Amazon, particularly for reading list titles at possibly very short notice, so we wanted to bring those into the fold. And also cover specialist suppliers as well, so Overdrive was becoming a big supplier for ebooks and for audiobooks as well, so we wanted to bring them in, for example. We wanted to develop a service that would consolidate the request and delivery of high quality records so that everything was coming through a single channel, and also to have a single point of contact as well, because one of the comments that came up quite a lot was that where there were issues with metadata, it just wasn't clear who was responsible for sorting it out, and that caused a lot of extra work at university libraries. And we also wanted to make sure that we were putting as much as possible into that service as well, so orders, invoices, ebook collections, existing holdings, donations, all the kind of core things that university libraries are cataloguing every day. So as I mentioned, we wanted to produce something that would extend shelf ready, but we also didn't want to break shelf ready, because part of that workflow still exists within UniCat as well. So for example, we don't have the individual data about particular items, so things like the barcode that went on the book, for example, that still comes from the supplier. So we needed to make sure that that data still continued to come from them, but with the metadata coming from us. We also thought we could do something around direct delivery, because that was something we'd seen happen in the public library market. Instead of what had been a traditional workflow in academic libraries, where the books will come into a central point and the metadata was downloaded and checked and corrected, and then the books go out to where they're supposed to be. That's obviously delaying the books going out, but it's also meaning the stock is being handled multiple times, which is inefficient. We thought with UniCat we could produce a service that would enable those books to go straight to where they were supposed to be, and then the metadata just flowed in the background seamlessly. And the real driver behind all of that was to free up expert staff, because this is something that had come out in a number of reports and a number of meetings we'd had, that there was always more work to be done. As I'm sure you're all more than aware at university libraries. So things like freeing up staff to work on collection management, the EI initiatives, special collections, research management, reading lists, all of those different work that metadata staff get involved in. It meant that there would be more time to do that, and that's the real work that adds those unique services into your libraries that can't be outsourced. And unfortunately, we knew that there were some libraries who were in the position of having to redeploy or reduce staff. So we also wanted for libraries that were in that unfortunate position to be able to allow them to continue to have a source of high quality metadata, but to do that with less staff if that had to be done. So we talked, as I said, to a lot of the key stakeholders. So these are sort of common themes that came out. So some of them from meetings that we'd had with libraries, some of them came out from the GISC report on metadata marketplace, and some from the report that NAG commissioned and the booth did, looking at the quality of shelf-ready metadata. So there were issues around multiple sources of metadata. So most libraries are taking data from lots of different sources. That has an overhead because each of those channels has to be managed. All of those records were not necessarily to the same standard either, so that had challenges in making sure that once those records got to the library that they were all brought up to the same standard. There was a particular issue around poor quality records for ebooks, So obviously, if the records aren't very good, then your users can't find those resources, so that's a waste of everybody's time in getting those and paying for them, especially if they're expensive ebooks and then they can't be discovered, so that's not great. There were lots of inefficient and time-consuming workflows that libraries were looking to get rid of. There was manual input in terms of creating, sourcing, importing or editing records. There was a real feeling that libraries were paying twice, once to acquire the record and then again to make it fit for purpose, which again we thought we could remove that. And all of that meant that there were delays in cataloguing, so the books weren't getting to the users fast enough either. And the knock-on effect was that staff were undertaking a lot of what was quite low-level routine work instead of focusing on those projects that would really discover unique material and provide unique services to your users. So, as Leslie alluded to, we worked with the publishers. They've been instrumental in making this happen. So they are providing us digital copies of frontlists, so that's the titles they're currently publishing, as well as backlists of their older titles, and they're doing that for print, ebooks and open access titles. We've got that digital vault. As of yesterday, we had just over 625,000 titles in there, and that goes every day, so that's a big source that we're using for cataloguing. What that enables us to do is to proactively create records for titles which we think academic libraries are going to be buying. So we're getting that data ahead of publication, so that means we can have those records ready for publication, so for when they'll be delivered into your libraries. And what that means is also that when you are ordering records from us through UniCat, we do have a good pool of existing records, so those come straight back to you. If we need to create a record or upgrade a record, then those are automatically directed into our cataloguing team, and we'll have those to you within 2 working days of request. And the more libraries that we have signing up to UniCat, the bigger that pool of existing records gets, so the more records we have to come straight out, so speed that up as well. This is a very high-level diagram of what happens, the background. So we start off with the Onyx data that Leslie was talking about, so that's coming in from the publishers. So that's data that is really designed for providing information for the work of the book trade, so things that bookshops will need, for example, or wholesalers need. It's not designed for library use. So the first task we do is to map that into Mark, so that's quite a big job in itself. It's not always very well represented in Onyx. The publishers aren't always very rigorous about putting the right data in the right field, so there's a bit of an overhead there to make sure that we actually pull data out of the field in Onyx and map it into the right field in Mark. Those are the very first records we start with. That is not a quality record we would ever send to a university library or even a public library. They wouldn't go out of the building. The next thing we do is we upgrade those to a CIP record. So that's with information that publishers are providing to us ahead of publication. And that enables us to do things like classification, we can do the subject headings, we can do the first part of authority control and standardising the record. And then the final stage we do is to take that CIP record to a confirmed record, so that's working book in hand, so with the titles in that digital vault. And we're transcribing them from the actual copy and doing the final check to make sure that the work we did at the CIP stage is still accurate at the confirmed publication stage. So we're checking the subjects, we're checking the classifications, authority control again, and doing a final check on the records. So those are the records that you'll be getting from us, so they are done book in hand. There's various routes for acquiring records, so I'll go through each of these in turn, but those are the different options that the libraries have. So the first one, which is delivering the bulk of the records, is for orders and invoices. So it's an automated workflow, and it's requesting and delivering customised full-level records for orders and invoices. So it just sits and runs in the background once it's been put in place. It's vendor neutral, so it works with all suppliers, not just those offering shelf ready, so it does cover things like Amazon. It's format neutral, so it's the same workflow for print, ebook and open access titles. It doesn't work in a different way. And there's no staff intervention beyond the initial setup, which is quite quick to do. One library had it in place within about an hour, so it can be done very quickly if necessary. And that then means that records are just flowing seamlessly into the LMS in the background. And we currently have that live with Alma and also with Rialto. So if you're an Alma library, if you have Rialto already, it'll work. Or if you're an Alma library who wants to implement Rialto in the future, it actually carries on in the same way. You don't need to do anything different from our point of view. We also have integration with ESS, Research Dynamics and Keller. I'll just look at the ALMA workflow purely because that's the system that the majority of university libraries have. So it starts with a purchase order being created and sent to the supplier, or an invoice being received and entered into ALMA. There is then an analytics report which is automatically extracting data of those orders and invoices and sending that to us every day. We get that as an Excel spreadsheet. Our system then extracts data from that to enable us to do a match on our database. So where we have an existing record, so those are the full level book in hand records, those are sent straight back. So libraries will get the first file from us immediately. Everything else then goes towards our cataloguing team, and then they will be upgrading records or creating records from scratch if we need to do that. And we aim to do that within 2 working days. And then once those records are ready, they are also dropped onto our FTP server, and then there is a job on ALMA which is watching out for files of records coming from us, and as soon as it sees one, it's pulling them through. And the libraries have control of how those records are imported into the library system using import profiles. So you can have different profiles for print books and e-books, for example, if that's how your library works. And alongside all of that, there's notifications going out to the libraries letting you know what we have records for straight away. So those are what we call hits, so they come straight back to you. Notification of anything that's going to be upgraded, so you know what we're working on for you. And then finally, anything that was out of scope. So that is usually anything that is published pre-2010 and not in English. So if we don't have records for those, then you'll be notified so that you know you need to get those from elsewhere. If we do have records, then we certainly would send you those. We're not excluding them from the process, but it's just not primary material that we're working in. The next is around ebook packages. So we have various ways this works. This depends on the library system. So we have done some automation for ALMA, the request of Imperial, that went live earlier on this year. So that for ALMA, that works in a similar way to the orders and invoices workflow we just looked at. For other library systems, it's a slightly manual process in terms of the initial creation of the file of records to match on, but then it works in exactly the same way. So for ebook packages, we are matching on our database of existing records. So we have just over 15 million records from 1950 onwards, and that's an amalgamation of BDS's own records, as well as the British Library and Library of Congress databases that we hold internally too. And that would also cover obviously pre-2010 titles because it goes back to 1950, but also non-English language titles. And also we actually have quite good coverage for open access titles as well within that database. And that means that we are providing thousands of unique records to libraries who are taking advantage of that service as well. So that's obviously making those books much more discoverable for students and saving staff time in trying to source those records elsewhere or edit records that may come from publishers. Next workflow we have is for more of an ad hoc workflow. So this can be used for different things. So libraries might use it, for example, for donations. You get some donations into your library and you want to know if you've got records. Then you can create a file. It's usually quite a straightforward text file with ISBNs that can be dropped onto our FTP server. Again, we're doing that match on that existing database of records, and then we'll return to you anything we have an existing record for, and we can do things like sort of standard customization to those records as well. Then the final workflow is sort of single request. So libraries might use this if you are doing perhaps a reclassification exercise and you've got a record but you just need an updated classification or changing classification schemes, then you can search our database and see what classification we have on that title. And this is either by Z3950 or API, and we can see from the stats that we can see in the background that this is actually quite heavily used by our UniCat libraries. Some libraries are making very heavy use of this. And so it's obviously providing a lot of data as well into libraries, and again that's using that same database of 15 million records. In terms of pricing, we talked to Jisc and Sconnell and asked advice on how we should price. They advised us to use Jisc banding, so it is priced on Jisc bands, and I haven't got the pricing with me because there's obviously quite a lot of Jisc bands, but if you need to know the price for your library, then I can certainly give you that information. We do have options for libraries without Jisc bands. We do have some UniCat libraries that don't have a Jisc band, and so we will work with you and work out a pricing based on expected need. So things like FE colleges, we also have an offering for FE colleges and non-HE academic libraries as well. So we do have joiners here from the UKHSA as well. So we are supplying libraries to non-standard academic libraries. We also work with the House of Lords as well. The price includes obviously the records, which we would expect to be many thousands of records a year. The setup works, so putting in those automated workflows and any standard customisation, so we can set and do sort of standard things that libraries want. Obviously, we would expect this to save you money. We are removing duplication of effort, both across different libraries, but also in a wider sense across the whole ecosystem within the UK for metadata. We guarantee that the records are high quality, so we wouldn't expect you to have to spend time checking and editing those records. Records are always created to the latest standard and future-proof, so you don't need to worry about making sure that things like linked data, for example, that you will have records that will be ready for that. Leslie mentioned earlier about, we'd like to think that it removes the need to subscribe to other cataloguing services. So if you are subscribing to things like classification services, for example, then you wouldn't need necessarily to subscribe to those with UniCat because that data will come from us. And ultimately, what we're aiming to do is to ensure that the resources can be found and used, especially for expensive ebook titles. So, if you've gone to the trouble of identifying an ebook title, working out which license from which platform, from which supplier is the most appropriate for the need that you're going to make of that ebook, for that title to then be undiscoverable, that's a lot of wasted effort. So clearly you want to make sure that we're providing records that will ensure that those books are used heavily by your students. And the aim of all of that is to employ your staff to do work that will really increase the range of services that you can offer to your students, make special collections discoverable, all of those things that you need to do. We also would expect that it will improve efficiency within your library. So when we were doing the initial consultation work on UniCat, we spoke to a library who'd helpfully done some statistics on the number of queries to their help desk, and they had attributed 15% of those directly to poor metadata. So that's quite a significant number of queries that are to do with students not being able to find things that you have got in your library. And so again, we would expect that to go away. We also talked about freeing up your specialist metadata staff. So those staff have very specialist skills that can be used to enhance the library, and University Arts are going to talk this afternoon about some of the wonderful things that their cataloguers get involved in, which we certainly couldn't do records for. I've already mentioned about freeing up staff to work on those value-add projects, and about direct delivery, making them unnecessary to multiple handle new stock and to get those books out to your students quicker as well. And really the aim of all of this is that the new items that you're purchasing just go straight into stock to become available for your users, and that metadata just flows into the background without you needing to do anything. It just seamlessly happens. We also would like to hope that UniCat will add to your reputation as an institution as well. We all know how important an excellent library is to academic success. There are well-documented case studies on mapping the amount of time and engagement that students have with the library to their eventual outcomes being much better as well. So, again, we would like to think that we will help with that process. It obviously allows you to demonstrate best practice in metadata provision, so you can prove that you are doing things in a very efficient way. Metadata to the latest standards, as we've said. And Leslie talked about a better, greener supply chain as well, which is obviously very important. All universities have an agenda to make sure that they are working in a way that is sustainable and making best use of the resources that we have. We'd like to think that it would increase the amount of student-facing time so that you have more time to spend face-to-face with your users. And one of the things that is becoming more important now is around linked data and AI. So I think most universities, with very few exceptions, don't have linked data enabled catalogues to a very great degree. And to take that move from where most libraries are now to a catalogue that is linked data enabled, you're not going to want to touch every one of however many million records you've got in your system. You want to do that in an automated way. And that will only work if you have structured, high quality, correctly encoded data with correct classifications, correct authority data, subject data. And what you can then do, if you have all of that, you can automatically start inserting linked data elements into your catalogue, which is something we've done internally as well. So that's going to become more important, I think, that libraries do have that data that is really well structured. And that has knock-on effects for AI. So if you're looking to do AI initiatives in terms of collection development, none of that will work if your data is not standard to start with. AI will just come out with junk. So it's going to become more and more important that that metadata is really high quality. Just moving on from that, this is a report that Clarivate did earlier on this year. It was live between April and June, and it was a survey of institutions' trends and their impact and what they were looking to do with AI. It ran with academic, public and national libraries. I've just pulled out one of the findings which is relevant to today. One of the key goals that was coming out from that survey was that libraries were looking to implement AI to help with content discoverability. Over 45% were looking to do that. And as I was just saying, that's not going to work if your catalogue's not high quality. Just a little bit more about carbon footprint as well. Some of you will know I used to work at Dawson Books. When I worked there, we used to ship hundreds of books a week from Norwich up to Dumfries for the cataloguing to be done, and then it would come back. So that's obviously quite a big overhead, which is not at all green. We don't do that anymore. It's all done from using that digital vault that we've created. Anything that we do, so things like CIP records, that used to be done with, as I was saying, faxes being produced. I can remember the days when that used to happen. That's all done electronically as well now. So we have a very paper-free workflow in the office. So if you were to come and watch our cataloguers, you would see most of them sitting with two screens, one that they're doing the cataloguing in, and the second one where they've got the digital vault content up and they're cataloguing against that. Obviously, direct delivery, books going straight to where they're destined to be, is a much more efficient way of getting the books to the library they should be at. And centralising those cataloguing activities rather than dispersing them across multiple institutions or doing the same way, the same work. It's much better if everything is done once, and then we'll get the benefits of it. But none of that would matter if we weren't efficient at what we do. So we have been independently benchmarked against institutions doing a similar kind of work, and every time we were significantly more efficient in the way that we work. Partly because, as Leslie was saying, we have systems that are written in-house bespoke for us that we have control over. So it means we can design systems to be incredibly efficient at doing metadata, which you just wouldn't do if you weren't doing it in the volume that we do. So just to summarise what UniCat is promising, so automated delivery of records, 2-day turnaround for anything that is immediately available, intervention-free integration into your workflows, best, most accurate future-proof records, latest standards and classification, possibility of sharing those records, and what we would hope is unrivaled product support from BDS.